We're here today with Eric Bibb. He's got a great new album. And the first track you just heard off it is called Tulsa Town. It took about 100 years, but the massacre in Tulsa finally became mainstream knowledge. What did seeing that feel like?
It's funny you say mainstream knowledge. Um, I saw recently on YouTube, I believe, a clip with Tom Hanks. I don't know if you're aware of that, but Tom Hanks made a reference to the Tulsa massacre and was talking about his sense of, outrage, really, that he had just become aware of it recently. And he was upset that uh, this history was kept from uh, school children, kept from adults, kept from people who should know about this kind of thing. And I thought it was interesting that somebody as prominent, a celebrity as prominent as Tom Hanks, would not only take the time to express his feelings about not knowing about this and being deprived of this information, but that he would what can I say? It's sort of like it's going to take that kind of uh, underlining of the fact, not only that it's happened, that it happened, but the fact that it was kind of submerged. It's going to take a person of his stature and celebrity pointing these things out that will, I think, finally bring that kind of mainstream awareness, uh, you know, into being. Yeah, what can I say? I think it's the beginning of uh, hopefully a significant change because, as you say, this was 100 years ago, and you wonder how much we don't know about what really has been going on in our country, and yeah, it's gratifying. That's all I can say. And it's gratifying that it came from somebody like Tom Hanks, who isn't an African American, Yeah.
You call yourself a survivor of that community in Tulsa. What do you mean by that?
Well, it's a poetic license to a degree because I'm actually um, being the voice of an actual survivor. Trevor, what I enjoy doing as a songwriter is actually giving voice to people who didn't have a voice in their time and place for obvious reasons. And so in the song, it's basically a first person account of somebody who actually, maybe as a child, because it really was a long time ago, but as a child who maybe was in the middle of all of that uh, chaos. So I mean it in that sense, but I also mean it in the sense of being an African American. I feel like, to a degree, vicariously or whatever, uh, psychically or psychologically or however you want to put it, I feel like many people have inherited that memory. You know what I mean? It's sort of like it didn't happen directly to me, but somehow I'm affected by it, and that therefore I can claim to be a survivor because if you add up all of the kind of atrocities that whole people have been subjected to and passed on that trauma, from generation to generation, then you can understand why I call myself a survivor.
So I had learned about Tulsa sort of with the 100-year anniversary
Hmm.
uh commemorations and that whole George Floyd summer.
Right.
But I had absolutely no idea that John Howard Griffin existed
Wow.
or that or that someone could actually do that much good by changing the color of their skin.
Right.
What drew you to that little known story?
Right. Well, the fact is, I actually knew about it for some time. John Howard Griffin's book, Black Like Me, came out in the early 60s, I believe. I was aware of it definitely sometime in the 60s. Read it then and reread it not long ago, not too long before I decided to write the song. And I was actually kind of surprised that there hadn't been another song. Maybe somebody else has written a John Howard Griffin song. I'm not aware of it. But I was very happy to not only hear your comment now, but to hear people uh, say similar things to me, that they'd never been aware of such a kind of yeah, earth-shaking story, really, because it is pretty radical to change your skin color to impersonate a person of another ethnicity, and to report on it. So to me, that was great just now to hear you say that you hadn't heard about it. It makes me feel like my intuitive feeling of sharing true narratives that have been uh, kept from us um, fills a gap, and that there is a function to a purpose to my making a song about John Howard Griffith beyond entertaining and making a song that people enjoy listening to. It's an educational tool, and to be able to be a bit of an informer and an educator is gratifying. Really.
So, short of changing the color of their skin and writing a book about it, what is the best role a white person can
Mm-hmm.
play in the civil rights struggle today,
Mm-hmm.
especially for my listeners who are geared towards, we're
Mm-hmm.
on Long Island, so it's a
Yeah.
decently white audience for a folk music show.
Yeah. Well, first of all, let me say this. I'm kind of well, what can I say? Uh, I'm pleased that you asked me as an African American to share what my feelings would be on that. My take would be on what the best thing for a person who's not an African American, a so-called white American, to do. Thank you for that. Um, I'll say this. I think the best thing that we can all do, and I'll really underline this, I think it's important for, let's talk about Americans for the moment. I think it's important for Americans to realize that this is not a civil rights movement to better the lives of African Americans only. This is a movement to better all Americans' lives. And when we finally realize that we're all in this together, that we've all been traumatized by the brutal history of racism in America, when we realize that it's not the burden of African Americans, but it's the responsibility of all Americans to try to really confront our past in an honest way so that we can come up with ways that we can slowly but surely, and I say slowly because I'm very aware of the fact that change, and I mean the kind of change that has been, what can I say? What we need to change is an orientation towards this, a kind of attitude, a perception of each other that's been ingrained for years, hundreds of years. Those kind of deep rooted attitudes and preconceptions about who we are not changed overnight. They're not changed because some lawmaker manages to push through a new law, a piece of legislation that might be reversed 6 months down the road. So what I'm saying is that we have to realize that it's a problem, a threat to all of us, not just African Americans. And when we shoulder it as such, then I think we'll be really on the road to seeing some change. But I also want to say again, I read somewhere recently that change moves at the speed of an ocean liner, not a speedboat. And I think we have to be aware that that's just a fact of life. And there are many things that need to change in the world. And the change happens because people care and they keep at it. It's not going to change just because there is an uproar uh, uh, that the media follows for a while and then drops. I mean, in the aftermath of the George Floyd murder, obviously it was gratifying to see other people than African Americans standing up for the civil rights of African Americans, for Black lives, all of that. That was encouraging. But like I said, to me, it's a question of really understanding that it's an issue involving us all. It's not like a weekend thing, like maybe I can join this march today. This is something that is at the core of the fabric of our lives. And to realize it as such means that you make a commitment, a kind of lifelong commitment to um, reading, participating in a conversation, reading books with uncomfortable titles, basically getting to know each other. I think part of the problem is the results of serious segregation for hundreds of years is that Americans might live side by side, go to school to each other, but they may not know each other. They may not have friends who look different from them themselves or their families. And this is what's essential. We have to really start to mix it up. Yeah, yeah. And music is a great way, by the way, to get that process rolling, and it always has been. You know, one of the reasons why young white music lovers got any familiarity and acquaintance with Black people was through their love of the music. When jazz buffs or blues buffs started going into other neighborhoods to hear music that was made by a whole nother tribe, that was the beginning of some kind of getting to know each other that I think is essential.
Well, thank you for that. We're going to hear the ballad of John Howard Griffin, and we will be right back.
Great.